Now you can then call it a name, give it a name, so that when you are navigating it is easy for you to navigate. But I think I've gone ahead of myself by attaching a name, student detail. You can see here that I said the URL you should navigate to is student detail. That means the name I should give to that URL is student detail, which is what I used here. So it should be the same, otherwise it will not navigate or it will not call this function. So anytime you navigate to this URL, it will then call the functions student detail that is inside the views.py file. So I will just clean this for now. I believe you have gotten the illustration. So now let us now come and define our student details page. Our student details page. So inside our student details page, of course, we are passing the ID, not just ID now. We are passing it as we are passing it as student ID. You can see here, we are passing it as student ID. So you should use exactly this name. If you call it ID here, that is when you can come here and name it ID. But if you call it student ID, you should not go there and use ID, otherwise your code will not work. So come here and say student underscore ID and it should be the same. So that's why sometimes I prefer just copy and paste so that I'll save myself the stress of having to troubleshoot and troubleshoot. Because of course there are some programmers that have the strength to troubleshoot, but me, I prefer life to be very easy. So now I go the student way. Of course, don't forget that I already have the model student, which is coming from the models file. Then I will then go students. I will then go students, and I will go the instead of now using object.all, I will then use object.get. That means I want to get just one file, and the file I want to get is I want the ID field. Don't forget that it has ID field, it has first name field, it has last name field, and so on and so forth. So the ID field I want to use now is the ID field because that is what the user is passing as one of the parameters of the URL. So I'll then say it should be equals to this particular student ID. So it will just look through all the record in the database, and anytime it's able to spot a particular element that has the same ID with the ID I'm passing as a parameter to this function, it will just pick that particular record and attach it to the student, just one. So it will not be an array of objects this time around, it will just be an object. So now that we have it, so I will then go the way of return render. So I want to render an HTML page now, and of course I'll pass the request. Then which page do I want to render? Don't forget that we have students, slash. So I want to render the student details page. So I'll just student details. So then go HTML, and inside there, of course, let's see if it will navigate us to this student details page first. No. So let us go. Of course, we are going to be extending our base.html again. So let me just duplicate what I have here, and I go this way. I will then come here, just copy and paste to save time. So instead of me to say all 2 students or all 3 students or all 10 students now, I will then say the student first name. I'll then display the first name. Let me just say first name, and first name and last, no, not and last name, first name, last name. So meaning if the student is John Doe, then I'll just display the John here and I'll display the Doe here. So of course we also have the content now. So I'll just copy this block to save time. Copy this block. And don't forget, when you open a block, you should always remember to end the block. So what I just do here is, of course, let's just see if it works first. Let me just say h1, and I close the h1 tag, heading 1, and I just say student details. So I told you that you should always test your code on the go. So I save this. When I save all this, I come back to my, I refresh. This is now a link, but for now we are not complicating issue with HTML, CSS. Let's just learn the logic. Later we will, of course, you learned how to beautify a page already, but let's see how things work and not just waste our time designing. So I click on view. You can see that I have, because this one is so big, is because I've zoomed my web page. So now I have the URL and I have ID of the current element that I click on. This is one. Now I go back and I click on the second one for you to know it is dynamic. You can see that now it was one before and now it is two. So now what I want to do is, of course, you know that we have just one and two elements. Let me just say four now. Of course, you see something here that is saying does not exist at 4. Of course, you can just read, but now what it's saying is I only have two elements or two records in the database, which is ID1, ID2, but now I am passing ID4 to the URL, and it's now telling me that okay, I try to fetch the students, but I'm not seeing it. So what you then do to solve the error, because now you're going to be displaying the record of the student here, and if the user now navigates to a student that does not exist, okay, there's some user that can be very, that want to test your code here and there and see if it's you handle all the exceptions. So you should always pay attention to that. That okay, there might be times when the ID of the element does not, the student does not exist. So what you just need to do is come in here and possibly you can just use the try except. Of course, try except try is just a way of okay, run this code. If it's fine, if it work, then continue, or if it does not work, throw an error. So I'll just go the way of okay, try this line. Don't forget Python indentation. I bring it in for, so try if you're able to get the students, then if it work, all well and good, but if it does not work, then I say except. So meaning that if this line work, then it will just keep the except, but if it does not work, then come around the exception. So what I will just do in the exception is I'll raise 404 error, and to raise 404 error you need to come and import it from Django HTTP. I believe you are getting yourself familiar with some functionality of Django. To raise the 404 error is just unseen or unfound, like you are looking for a record but you do not see it, so on and so forth. Let's not waste time with that. HTTP, Django HTTP, and let us import HTTP 4.4. Of course, you can see different HTTP response, HTTP forbidden, HTTP not response not allowed, not found. But for now, we are staying with the 404 error. So just raise the 404 exception error. Say 404 exception and just say students not found. Student not found, and now let's go and try the same thing again. Now let's try and go back now. Now let's now try to navigate with 10. Page not found. You can see now that it's raised an exception of 404 and it's telling us that students not found, which is the exception, which is the error message that we put there instead of our code to break. Of course, when you're dealing with the front end, you can decide to navigate the user to the 404 page so that the user that doesn't have an idea of programming can then, of course, someone might just pause or this looks, but you can just handle that when you're dealing with the front end. But for now, we are looking at the logic. So now if you try this, if it work, then continue running the code by coming here, but if it does not work, then raise an exception. So that means if the code work, it will just keep this line, so just keep this line and then jump to this line.